Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. My guest is Dr. Linsey Willis. She is an author with 44 years of human resource experience as a management and organizational consultant, expert witness, coach, and educator. And we're going to talk about her experiences and her book that has come out. It's called Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder. So it's a heartwarming, heart-wrenching memoir about her experience as a lifelong caregiver for her sister who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the age of 21. So Dr. Willis, if you would like to tell us a bit about yourself, and then we can kind of talk about, your book, why did you decide to write it, and your experience with your sister?
Well, myself, currently I'm a recent widower. Fortunately, my husband got to listen to us reading some of the chapters of my book before he passed away. He lived with the situation with my sister from all the years of our marriage. We were together 39 years, so he was well aware of all we went through, me together with him or just separately. I have my own consulting business, so that's good. I work in 3 different areas. I work in law enforcement for promotional testing. We help people get promoted into management ranks throughout the U.S. We write exams for police departments. I work in another area of an expert witness for personal injury attorneys and also employment law attorneys and personal injury attorneys, negligent hiring, retention, and supervision. And then the other area I work in is I teach some workshops at executive ed at FAU, and then I also do week-long workshops for a company based in Dubai. So my plate is very full, but a lot less full than it was before. So, why did I write the book about my sister? Well, I started writing the book about my sister back in the very early 90s, and I had a very rough draft of the book, and my parents read it, and they said, one day this book will be published. And then I put the book down for 20 years. And then I picked it back up again and started working on it in around 2022, and never even thought I'd get it published. But I'm very glad it's published. There's 3 chapters of self-help in the book, and I wanted to memorialize my sister's life, and it was also healing for me and therapy for myself.
Yeah. No, I know that with writing my own book, same thing. I wrote it mostly for myself, but yeah, definitely had that cathartic part of it as well, which was wonderful to have. So tell us a bit about your sister, her illness, kind of how it impacted you, your family, so on.
Well, I lived with my sister's illness my whole life, even though we lived in different states. I moved to Florida in 1980. My God, I can't believe it, after I finished grad school, even though she was living in different states, mostly in New Jersey. I was impacted by her life because of the fact that she had been diagnosed at age 21 with bipolar disorder. And then she was treated for it. She had an overdose of Quaaludes, and it's in a book. And she was at Brown University, Butler Hospital at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, for 3 months being treated. And that's when they diagnosed her. She was on lithium and a mild tranquilizer, and she was able to work for 12 years and have a fairly normal life and finish grad school. And she was, believe it or not, a master's in social work from University of Pennsylvania. And she, worked psychiatric social work, believe it or not. So I thought all was well, and that I didn't know then that there's no cure for it, and that it's found out it was genetic. And then just later on in her life, when it got her life spiraled out of control, I was exposed to it almost several days a week, on the phone with my parents when she was living with them because she could no longer. She had her first marriage and divorce and moved in with them and managed to work for a little bit, but then she could no longer work. The illness was so bad, that was it. She could never work again.
Wow. So did they try, I know today's day and age medications might be different than they were for her when she was first diagnosed, but did they not have like a medication regimen that could work to help with her disorder?
Well, you see, lithium was the miracle drug that came out, I think, in the late 60s, early 70s. And it's basically a salt, and that stabilized her for 12 years and a mild tranquilizer. But then it became toxic, and she could no longer take it. And I recall one time she allegedly overdosed on it because she had taken more than she should have because she would get her own prescription of it.
Yeah.
So from that point on, it was all these different meds that she tried. And, it's just crazy. It was just, and there was a time when she would get the medication still at the pharmacies in Daytona Beach, and then she would, take too many and then she got kind of hooked on, well, not really hooked, but they eventually just called her dual diagnosis. She's not only bipolar, but she's a prescription drug abuser. If that's private.
Yeah. No, I had a guest in a earlier episode talking about bipolar disorder and depression, and she made the comment to me that when she first started on medication, she realized that one made her feel better, so she thought more would make her feel even more better. So that's why she would overdose herself, looking for that magical whatever piece where I'm going to feel quote unquote normal is the word she used. And I was thinking, oh, okay, I can see where that would come into play, right? So how did you deal with your sister's illness throughout her life as her sister? I mean, you said you lived in different states, but still connected to family. Kind of how did that impact you?
Well, I lived with it every day of my life. I thought about her every day. I despite the fact that she was very cruel to me when I was growing up and very, very mean, I was always there for her, and I always had her in the back of my mind because of the tumultuous life she lived after she had her first divorce, and just dealt with my parents with her and hoping that someday she would get better. But the more you learn about the illness, they're never going to get better. They're just going to get stabilized. So I dealt with it every day. It was painful, but I continued with my work and my career. But I always had, like my mother would say, put something in a box and put it in the closet so you don't think about it. But it was always there in your mind.
Yeah.
And sorry for her and feeling. There were times when I felt like I should have been the one that got the illness, because when we were growing up, she was always smarter, got better grades, got almost perfect scores on all her college entrance exams, was a better athlete than me, could do, better swimmer than me. She could do all the gymnastics I couldn't. So I always felt like I was in her shadow. And then when she got really ill, it was very difficult. But I continued in my career and my life, but that was just something all part of your life that's always there. My parents were dealing with it more than I was during those college years in the beginning of my career, and then when she had to live with them, and then it became more in the 90s, it became all the time because she was living with them, and then she finally wasn't, living in different places. We all dealt with her.
Yeah.
So it was always there in our minds.
Right. So what were some of the things that you did to sort of deal with all that pressure and grief and frustration and so on during those years?
Well, for well over 25 years, my husband and I did long distance running as well as triathlons. So the long distance running, training for marathons and or just running, 10K races and stuff, that relaxes you. The endorphins kick in, and you're able to deal with, any kind of stress, because when you're physically active and you're you get the runner's high. That helps you, deal with stress and sadness.
Yeah.
And then just talking to some friends about it, and just hoping and praying that things would get better.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I want to ask you about though is kind of the stigma. So I know there's a big stigma about mental illness in this country, otherwise other places as well, but it's just for our own culture where people don't really talk about it. So it's kind of like, and mental illness is more of a hidden illness. So it's like a disability, if you will, where I can't tell by looking at this person that they've got something going on because it's a mental illness. So did you find that, kind of, especially as you're looking for, resources yourself or looking to talk to people about this experience, kind of that stigma come into play where people are like, well, I don't know much about it, or why can't you just shake it off, or whatever the terrible things I've heard people say about persons that are dealing with mental illness?
Well, for years, when my sister ended up having to live with my parents when they moved to Florida in 1987, they're deceased now. They finally, they hid it away in the closet. They never told anybody. They finally told their neighbors, what the situation with my sister, because they just finally said, well, we're just going to, open the closet and tell people, why is your, daughter that age living with you?
Right.
Back then it was a stigma. People wanted to hide it, but now it's a lot more open. There's thousands. I've looked at of Facebook groups, and there's several groups I looked up, and there's thousands of people in these Facebook chat groups who are bipolar. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And now they're more out in the open because of social media. Things are more out in the open.
Yeah.
And so, and you don't want to tell anybody because, oh my God, they'll think that there's something wrong with me. It's really a chemical imbalance of the brain.
Right.
And, oh, there's something wrong, and so people shouldn't be embarrassed by it. They should be compassionate, but a lot of people are, I've got somebody in my family who's, mentally ill. Yeah. Well, there's millions of.
Yeah. Probably all of us have someone, at least one. Yeah.
But everybody I know, my friends, know somebody who has close to them, their family member or other friends that has somebody that has a mental illness.
Yep. It's very common. And again, but still stigmatized into a way where people just don't talk about it, or don't want to talk about it, or they want to make excuses and not, talk about how this is actually a medical condition. This is not someone who wants to be this way. I mean, person doesn't want to be depressed and they don't want to be whatever. I mean, it's just again, that brain imbalance. So how did your relationship with your sister, like later on, prior to her, or maybe after she's living with your parents, but up until the time she passed, what was it like as adults together?
Well, the last 6 or 7 years of her life, she was much nicer to me. The last 15 years of her life, she lived in an assisted living facility that we found for her in Spring Valley, New York. So she stabilized there. She had a boyfriend for 9 years. But prior to that, she was living in different places, and her third marriage ended. And the guy, her husband, that's in my book, who married her he met her down in Florida when they were in a dual diagnosis program. He just dumped her off at a state institution where his brother lived. So all these things that feeling at a distance because we were in different states, but I was dealing with it head on the phone, phone calls and all this other stuff. So it was always there, And when she was living with my parents, and then they could no longer have her live with them anymore, and she was living in different apartments, and we're living with it every day, and it was just phone calls, raising my voice at her when my husband said, don't yell at her. But it's so frustrating dealing with the behavior, and the.
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. That is difficult. Tell me a bit about so someone who's listening, obviously we want them to read your book to learn more about it, but tell us a bit about what kind of advice would you give to someone maybe as a caregiver or a coworker or a neighbor or whatever it might be, if they've got someone who is bipolar in their life that they are working with, dealing with, whatever it might be.
Well, I guess if you're a compassionate and caring person, the first thing I would advise them not to do is to say, we're going to discard this person. We're going to have nothing else to do with them ever.
Yeah.
Person's really, really sick. If they have schizophrenia, and they become violent and all that, or you just have them off. But if they're not in that situation where you're really scared of them, don't abandon the person.
Right.
They need a lifeline. So we were my sister's lifeline, but a lot of people don't want to be bothered. I've met several people in my life when I went to National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, and other people that have, they've got a mentally ill sister or brother. Well, how are they doing? I have no idea. We have nothing to do with them. So that's when I heard that years ago, I was like, are you kidding? Or they're not in touch. Why? Because we don't want anything to do with it. I'm like, that's just so horrible.
Yeah.
How could you be so? Even though I went through some horrible times, and I even left some things out of my book that were even worse. I said, I can't write anymore.
Yeah, no, I know.
Be patient. That's why the book is called Be There. It finally hit me. I've come up with all these different titles, and all of a sudden I'm reading over the draft and I'm going through it. I'm like, wait a second. Oh my God. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I said that. I was always there. Be there.
Yeah.
That's the best thing you can do.
Yeah, I heard that. Tell me one part in your book that struck me, where you introduced what we call the 4 C's. So tell us a bit about the 4 C's and kind of how that can be helpful with someone who's dealing with a situation like this.
First of all, you have to realize you're not the one that caused the illness. They may blame it on you. Say the ill person may blame you for their behavior. You didn't cause their illness. You can't cure it. That's for sure. And you didn't cause it. You can't cure it. Can't control it. Do things to help them to have a better life and enable them to cope better in their life by being there. But you must cope with it.
Right.
The best thing to do is cope. Many ways to cope with the illness, but how I did do all those things, all those years.
Right.
The best coping is to not abandon them and be there.
Yeah.
Because you how to cope with it to the best of your ability. You build strength, and you have to have strength. We helped you financially. That's another thing very important. But not everybody can help them financially. And you didn't ask the question yet, but first of all, I didn't think the book would ever get published. I sent it to 12, not the top 5, but I sent it to 12 publishers. Most of them were hybrid, no self-publishers. I got 3 acceptances, 3 rejections, and the others never got back to me. That's how tough it is to get a book published. But once I got it published, I didn't care about the money. I want this to go viral because I want to give the money back to society. I want to give it back to our center we have in Boca Raton that help people, and also maybe through National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. I want to give the money back to families and people that need help, because there are thousands of people living in our 10 cities on the street. They have nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. They just become discarded.
Help
society as a whole.
Money's not about me. I want to make the money for myself. I want to help. Of course, I keep some of it. I want to take it to help other people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very admirable. I know we're going to, in the podcast notes when your episode airs, have a link to your website and to your book so that listeners can follow up a little bit more learn more about you, about your book, certainly about, how to deal with the situation if they have someone in their life who is diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and just to learn more about it. I think a lot of things when it comes to especially mental health issues, I think just people learning more about what the issue is very helpful, so that they don't sit back, and that helps to eliminate or erase or whatever, kind of decrease that stigma that's out there about that as well. So we're definitely going to do that. But is there anything else you'd like to share before we end today?
Well, I think you by reading the book, you'll read about all the different characteristics.
Yeah.
But there's a section on there about the different types of bipolar disorder. But then I provide numerous examples of those behaviors that my sister demonstrated. So then you learn that, a lot of them demonstrate these behaviors, like, grandiosity, pathological lying.
Yeah.
And you learn about, example. This is what happened, and this is what I did. Because it's going to help people,
Yeah.
And my website is BeThereBook.com.
Perfect. Well, like I said, we'll put that in the podcast notes so people can find it nice and easy. One click. Be there. So yes. Well, Dr. Willis, thank you so much for being my guest today. I genuinely appreciate your sharing your story. I did enjoy your book, so I'm sure anyone else who has any interest to do with bipolar disorder will find the same to be true.
Thank you, Dr. Malone, and we'll be in touch in the near future. Have a great rest of your day, too. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that the stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.